Gopichandra Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopichandra Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandanam Rajajanaranjana Yashodanandanam Rajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandanam Rajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopichandra Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravajakacharya, our store Sri Srimad, Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki, ISKCON Samstapakacharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki, Prem Se Go Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Ki, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki, Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki, Sri Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki, Sri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki, Sri Ayodhya Dham Ki, Ganga Mai ki jai, Jamuna Mai ki jai, Tulsi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Please repeat. Iti uttama shloka shika manim janeshu. Iti uttama shlokam sika manim janeshu. Abhistuvat sarvandaka koravastriha. Sametya Govinda Kata Mito Grinan Triloka Gita Shrinu Vanayamite SriSriRadhaRasbihariTemple. Please chant. SriSriRadhaRasbihariTemple. SriSriRadhaRasbihariTemple. Iti uttama shloka shikamanim janeshva. Govinda Kata Mito Grinan Triloka Shrinu Vanayamite SriSriRadhaRasbihariTemple. Iti uttama shloka shikamanim janeshva. Ladies, ladies, SriSriRadhaRasbihariTemple. The great sage Shukadev said, Uttama Shloka of great personalities who are glorified in choice poetry. Shekamani, the crest jewel, Lord Krishna, and Janeshu, his devotees. Vishtuvatsu, while they were glorifying Andaka Kaurava, of the Andaka and Kaurava clans. Striya, the women. Sametya, meeting. Govinda Katha, topics of Lord Govinda. Metta, among one another. Agrinan, spoke. Three, Loka, in the worlds. Gita, sung. Shinu, please hear. Varnayami, I will describe. Te, to you, Parikit Maharaj. The great sage Shukadev Goswami said, as Yudhisthira and the others were thus praising Lord Krishna, the crest jewel of all sublimely glorified personalities, the women of the Andaka and Kaurava clans met with one another and began discussing topics about Govinda that are sung throughout the three worlds. Please listen as I relate these to you. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshushrun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manu Vishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Maneham Shri Guru Shri Uttaparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagachatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvedam Savarutam Prijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Vishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagat Pate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishvari Vishavanushuta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Tinanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasini Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Vishyaruvacha iti uttama shloka Sikha manim jane shavi Stuvatsandaka Gauravastuya Samitya Govinda Katha Mitto Grinan Striloka Gita Srinuvanaya Mite Sri Rishiruvacha. The speaker, Sri Sukadeva Goswami, I offer my pranam to him. Sri Rishi Uvacha, this phrase is used in the Bhagavatam 8 times. There are 8 hits for Sri Rishi Uvacha. And I just checked out briefly the hits yesterday, and I saw some of the other verses in which Sri Rishi Uvacha is the beginning of the verse. And I saw some of the topics in the other cantos that Shukadeva Goswami was speaking on, and it just reminded me a little bit of how vast his learning is. He knew so much, so many topics about Krishna. It's just amazing. And so naturally, one wants to offer obeisances to him. Namaha, namaha, na is denial, na, and nama. Ma means my false ego. So I want to deny my independence as a possessor of this material body. And I want to declare my dependence on Shukadeva Goswami and all the sages like Srila Prabhupada. Here in this verse, there's a phrase, Shikamanim, crest jewel. I looked this up and according, it's not the best source, but Wikipedia says that Kaustubha, the word Kaustubha, literally, if you translate it, literally means crest jewel. Kaustubha gem was generated from the churning of the milk ocean. And it's a ruby, a pinkish red ruby that was given to Lord Vishnu. And it stands for his divine authority. It's such a valuable gem, crest jewel. So this word crest jewel, I think nowadays it means something like authority. It has the idea of authority, the most authoritative, the most significant in value. Someone who's exceptional, especially in regard to Krishna, someone who's exceptionally beautiful, and someone who's in an esteemed status, has divine authority, that crest jewel, that's Krishna. So Shukadeva Goswami is saying that the topic of the conversation between Yudhisthira and others was Lord Krishna, the crest jewel of all sublimely glorified personalities. And while they were conversing, the women of the Andaka and Kaurava clans, they met to discuss Govinda. Just a few verses back in verse 3 of this chapter, you might remember the idea was given that this kind of katha Govinda Katha, destroys. What does it destroy? Govinda Katha. Did you think that Krishna Katha is destructive? Here's Shukadev here. Shukadev does. Krishna Katha destroys the it says here, the embodied soul's forgetfulness. And what is the embodied soul forgetful of? The creator of his bodily existence. We all go about our bodily existence and we forget the creator of our bodily existence. Not devotees, no, not devotees so much, but the embodied souls, they forget this. Of course, we're still embodied. We're becoming unembodied because we are denying this body. I'm not this body. Huh? But it destroys the embodied soul's forgetfulness of the creator of their bodily existence. And Shukadev says something similar in the 7th canto. I found a similar statement that the wonderful topics of Krishna always counteract the miseries of the materialistic way of life. So these are some wonderful effects of Krishna Katha. And therefore, these effects are mentioned again. Even in the 11th canto, I found a verse spoken by Yudhisthira. He says that once the transcendental form of Krishna, once the transcendental form of Krishna has what? The form has entered the ears of the sages. The form of Krishna has entered the ears of the sages. That's unusual. Because usually, we don't think of our ears as a door for the form of Krishna. But that's a nice way of putting it. Once the form of Krishna has entered the ears of the sages and become fixed in their hearts, it would never depart. It becomes immovable. The form of Krishna is fixed in the hearts of the sages. That's the first thing that Yudhisthira says in one verse in the 11th canto. This verse has so many things. Then he says the great poets who describe the Lord's beautiful form would have their words invested with transcendentally pleasing attraction. So let's break that down into the synonyms. Karna, avishtam, having entered the ears. Nasharati, the form of the Lord would not leave. And Satam, the sages, Atma, in their hearts. Satam Atma. Sometimes the devotees are called Satam. In their hearts, there was attached to their hearts this form of Krishna. And then the great poets who describe the beauty of the Lord's form would have their words invested with transcendently pleasing attraction. So if you read the poetry by great devotees, there's a beautiful attraction Certainly, we have experience of this. We've all experienced the attraction of reading Srila Prabhupada's books. There's a transcendently pleasing attraction. Because, first of all, the words are very beautiful. The beauty of Krishna is being described, so the words are beautiful. The Sanskrit word Shri is used for that beauty, the beauty of the words. Words are vacham. Shri vacham, beautiful words, generate a special pleasurable attraction, ratim. So when you read this poetry, transcendental poetry, then you feel a special pleasure of attraction. Prabhupada was like Shukadev. He was a sage. He was like one of these sages in whom the Lord entered through the ears and became fixed in his heart. Prabhupada's heart was fixed. Krishna was attached to his heart. So this description fits Srila Prabhupada. And also he was a poet, like these poets described here, whose words are beautiful, whose words attract the reader. I was also thinking of a poet in America whom Prabhupada met. Prabhupada met a famous American poet, Allen Ginsberg. Ginsberg had been to India, and he brought back from India a harmonium that he donated to the devotees in New York on 26 2nd Avenue. And at least twice he accompanied Srila Prabhupada to big preaching programs. There was the program in San Francisco, the what was it called? I forget the name, but the devotees organized a big rock mantra concert. That was what it was called, the rock mantra concert. And Allen Ginsberg was there for that. Then later he went to Ohio to a college campus. He went out on college preaching with the devotees. And Prabhupada held a big program in Ohio at the campus where I think Hayagriva was a professor. His disciple Hayagriva Das. Allen Ginsberg was there for that. And once, even on television, national television in America, Allen Ginsberg played the harmonium and sang the Hare Krishna mantra to the person who was interviewing him, to the host. He was telling him about this and said, "Shall I sing that for you?" And okay. So he sang the Hare Krishna mantra on television. This talk about the poets like Allen reminded me of a poet who was a professor of mine. His name was John Berryman. He was the topic, I made him the topic of the first article I wrote for Back to Godhead magazine. Why did I write about him? He was a mundane poet. He wasn't a poet who described the Lord's form. But because he was my teacher and he had an influence on me that helped me become a devotee, I wrote a Back to Godhead article about him. I'll tell you a little bit about this today. This was around 1970. George Harrison had helped Srila Prabhupada. He had paid for the publication of the Krishna book, and the devotees were distributing the Sri Upanishad, the Gita, the Krishna book around early 1970s. And George Harrison was a very popular cultural hero among the young people. They just really were interested in what George Harrison thought and what George Harrison did. So a friend of mine bought this Krishna book, and he showed it to me, and we began to look at all the paintings, full of paintings. We saw the pastimes of Krishna, and Prabhupada said these are windows into the spiritual world, right? So the attractiveness of the spiritual world was communicated in these paintings. And one of the devotees who was preaching in Minneapolis, where I went to the university, she stopped me one morning and she said, "Would you like some cake?" She had a basket with cake. And I, of course, said, "Yes, I would like a piece of cake." And then she said, "Can you give a donation?" And I said, "Yes." And she was unusual because I had never seen tilak on a person. This is the first time I saw a person with tilak. And I thought, I wonder what that is. But I didn't ask her. Later, I would learn. Another devotee I talked to was at the book table. He set up a book table in the student union. Do you have student unions in India where the students congregate? Yeah, students go there, the college students. That's the place they can take a break in between class and so on. So I met a devotee at the book table. And he said something that really got a hold on me. He said, human life and animal life are similar because of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. But human life has a special purpose. It's especially for inquiring about the absolute truth. To me, this was such a profound statement because it showed that there was some special buddhi, some special intelligence, buddhi, or discernment, some special discrimination in the philosophy of the Krishna consciousness movement. They discriminated between animals and human beings on the basis of the purpose of human life being to inquire about the absolute truth. So I became really interested in this. I'm going to say something to give you a little shock. I'm going to tell you the first sentence of my article about my professor, John Berryman. I'm just going to read the sentence and let you feel the impact, okay? The poet John Berryman was my teacher at the University of Minnesota in 1972, the year that he jumped from a bridge over the Mississippi River and killed himself at the age of 57. He committed suicide on January 7th, 1972. Every January, I remember this. But then 2 years later, in January 1974, I joined ISKCON. So whenever January rolls around, I remember my teacher, John Berryman's suicide. And I remember coming into the Association of Srila Prabhupada in Los Angeles. I saw him there and heard his class. And I felt very grateful that Prabhupada had opened the ISKCON centers so that we could join his movement and start a new life. This old life that I had at the university, after Berryman's suicide, I became puzzled, about life. I wondered why he had killed himself. It was surprising because he had a very good reputation. He had won national book awards. Even in India, you give national book awards. So in America, he won prizes, national prizes as a writer. But his major achievements and his scholarship, very learned man, it had not sustained for him the value of living. He wanted to give up his life. So what was going on? I wondered, why? I didn't know at the time, so I began to investigate his life. Of course, just seeing him in person, in class, seeing him in the classroom, I understood, that his life was a little bit of a mess. He chain smoked. He would be speaking to us at the seminar table, and as soon as he finished a cigarette, he would light another cigarette, and I, thought, this is terrible, and what's going on with this man? But it turns out that he had really other big problems. He was an alcoholic, but he tried to get rehabilitated from alcoholism. Sometimes he would go into some treatments to rehabilitate himself. His women hunting was completely wild. He had been married 3 times, divorced twice, and he engaged in adultery. That means sexual contact with other women who are married. And he wrote about this in some of his poems. So eventually, this adultery is like poison. The Srimad Bhagavatam says it's actually like a poison. It may seem enjoyable at first, but it has a poisonous effect. And Berryman suffered from that. Readers of the Bhagavatam are warned, don't imitate Krishna's Rasa Leela. He can dance with the wives of other men, but anyone else who does this will experience a poisonous effect. So Berryman became overwhelmed by his misdeeds, his karma, and he jumped off a bridge in the middle of winter, and his body landed on the icy riverbank. Prabhupada had something to say about intellectuals in Kali Yuga. He said they're very intelligent people, but their character is very bad. They're women hunters, and of course they're meat eaters, and they get intoxicated, all these faults. They're not in the mode of goodness. Their intellectuals are supposed to be in the mode of goodness. But they're influenced by passion and ignorance. But Berryman did turn to God when he was being rehabilitated for being an alcoholic. He joined a group called Alcoholics Anonymous. You might have it even here in India. This group encourages drunkards to rely on God to overcome their problem with drinking. And it became so important to Berryman at one point that he wrote a series of poems addressing the Lord. So he had a kind of awakening that way. Because he was in so much distress, he turned to God. And still though, he said, I find it very hard to be a good man and to love God with my whole heart, with my whole mind. It's something I can't do, he said. So anyway, I was wondering, after this happened, I was wondering whether if I continued in my path to be a graduate student, I would end up like Berryman, immersed in academic life, but miserable. Berryman had written a letter recommending me to one graduate school. He supported my application to this school. But now, after his suicide, I was having second thoughts about taking up a scholarly career. I remembered what that devotee told me, that to become a wise human being, you have to inquire about the absolute truth. You can't live like an animal. So I eventually gave up my plan to go to graduate school, and I instead joined Prabhupada's movement. So one teacher, John Berryman, led to the other teacher, Srila Prabhupada. Berryman, though, was a very deep thinker, very intelligent, and I just mentioned something about his own investigations into the meaning of life. In America, people talk about the American dream. That means that you pursue material happiness, and maybe you'll get it. There's a good chance maybe in America you'll get it. But that's a delusion, right? Even if we achieve a high standard of life, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're civilized. The happiness might be very shallow. And Berryman saw this. Berryman could perceive that the American dream was a delusion. And he was concerned about the ignorance that kept people away from God. He actually, at some point, when he would read books about theology and so on, he would think about these things. So he discussed sometimes how men and women withdraw from God. He was surprised that people had this tendency, such a strong tendency to withdraw from God. To feel like there's no possibility of getting the mercy of God. There's no possibility that God can intervene in a person's life who is so much withdrawn from God. It's like the light and the darkness. If someone wants to remain in the darkness and avoid the light, then God permits him to have that freedom. So Berryman observed that that was the case with a lot of people. In his own case, when he was a young man, just a boy, when he was 10 or 11 years old, something terrible happened in his own life. And I'll just describe it. His father committed suicide with a shotgun. His father killed himself with a shotgun. Right outside John's window in the place where they lived. So he was very shocked as a boy. And of course, later he wondered, why God had allowed that to happen. He had some doubt. He had some doubt. He couldn't feel complete faith in God because of this. He used the words, this blew out my candle of faith. In one poem, he said, the suicide of his father blew out the candle of his faith. But still, he was searching for the truth. He wanted some ultimate answers about the meaning of life. For example, he wrote, I have no idea whether we live again. Sometimes in Christianity, they talk about the afterlife. So he said, I have no idea whether we live again. It does not seem likely. The Christians say that, the body is buried and then somehow the body, lives again at some point. That kind of afterlife, I don't know. It doesn't seem likely that the body is going to. We know the body is not going to be resurrected. Then Berryman also talked about the name of God, because, for example, in the prayer, the famous prayer, the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Jesus was teaching that the Lord's name is to be understood as a holy name. And Berryman actually said, if I say thy name, art thou there? Are you in your name? He actually wrote, he was questioning this in his writing. Is God in his name? He said, it may be so, but actually he was ignorant of the potency, the full potency of God's names, and he was ignorant of God. He didn't exactly know who God was. But compare Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was self-realized. And through his books, Bhagavad-gita, for example, he convinced us to chant. So I was happy to find another teacher. Instead of Berryman, I found Srila Prabhupada. What time is it, please? I didn't hear you. Time. 5 to 9. 5 minutes to 9. Okay, I'll stop then. Anybody have any comments? Ram Raj, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Now they say that this American dream is shattered.
Yes.
Great American dream is shattered.
Yes.
Because
But
especially in New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, so many homeless people, drug addicts, and their life has become miserable.
yes, they're living on the streets. They're taking drugs
Yeah.
that come from China. The British did this in China many years ago. The British exported opium to China, and they made Chinese, addicted to opium. Now the Chinese are exporting the ingredients for fentanyl to America, and it's coming across the Mexican border, and people are just going almost crazy by taking this drug, and they end up living on the streets. But we have Trump in America, and he'll make America great again.
Srila Prabhupada writes in Bhakti Rasam Sindhu that somebody may show some devotional ecstasies, but if he is attached to some mundane sex life again,
Some attached to
mundane sex life again,
mundane life again.
sex life, then it's all waste.
Yeah.
It's all pseudo bhakti and all. Prabhupada condemned that. So a devotee means really advanced means he is free from Vishayasakti, material.
Could you just repeat that?
A devotee, a real devotee, means that he is completely free from all material contamination. Then, he can attract Krishna. Otherwise, somebody may show some devotional symptoms, but if he is attached to mundane sense gratification, then Prabhupada condemned that. It's all waste. So you brought out this point that illicit sex poisons the heart. That is a very good point you brought it.
Krishna becomes attached to the heart of the sages. Yeah. The sages, yeah. The real attachment, not to material life. Thank you very much for the comments. Who was the translator today? Uh-huh. Was it okay? You could translate all right? You could translate everything all right? Huh? Yes. Okay, thank you very much, devotees. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.